So as Michelle mentioned, this project is in many ways, it's completely different than a more sort of traditional public art project. There was no competition, and the audience in a way is much more intimate. It's just the Simmons College community. So I wanted to just quickly go to describe my work just a little bit, just to give you some context of why Michelle invited me to be the artist to work with in this project. So this is actually the project I worked with Michelle. It's a high school in New York City called the High School for Law Enforcement and Public Safety. And it was newly constructed, and I created a piece that is in all the main lobbies on each floor. This is the main entryway. It's a two-story wall, and it's called Everyday Courage. And in each of these squares, it's a stainless steel box with a glass front on it. I collected from various law enforcement and public safety agencies from the federal, state, and local level, just objects and items related to their work. And it's also mixed in with some things that I just chose about people who were considered heroic or heroes. So the idea being that first off, we define heroes in very different ways, or people who once were maybe considered criminals, we now consider heroes. So how that definition can be shifted, and also about how if you're taking a career in law enforcement and public safety, how maybe it's not all the glamorous stuff like you see on TV that makes you heroic. And I liked the idea of making a wall that was had no hierarchy to it, so that important things were not necessarily the things right at eye level, which I thought would hopefully provoke students in conversation. So next, detail some of the blocks. So I had to work with all these various public safety and law enforcement agencies. So as an artist, these are not people that I normally work with, police officers, FBI agents, and things. So it was a real process to work with them to collect these items and get to know what they do day to day in the process of collecting the items. I'm going to go fast through these because we really want to talk about Simmons College. This is a project I did in Newfoundland in Canada. It's called the House Museum, and I literally transformed my house into a tourist site as a way of provoking discussion about how tourism affects local culture. So this is actually the ribbon cutting for the opening. Everything inside the house became a way of provoking conversation about local culture, and I invited tourists basically to become part of the exhibit, and I kind of turned the whole museum experience upside down so that the visitors became the exhibition, and locals demanded things of the tourists that don't normally get demanded of them. And so this was the ribbon cutting, and it was the man whose brother built the house, the mayor of the town, and the local member of parliament who came to open the house. So it became actually, the audience for the project became tourists, but also everyone in this town of about 200 people, and then along this bay in Newfoundland. So about, all in all, like 1,500 people basically became the project. This is a project I did at Wave Hill, which is a botanical garden in the Bronx. And it was ended up, the project originally was I was going to using botanicals, I would naturally dye wool, spin it into yarn, put it out for visitors to the garden to take on the agreement that they would make a hat and bring it back. And then we would do a hat exchange at the end. But what ended up happening, and I thought I would just be sitting in my little studio spinning yarn very quietly all winter, but instead everyone kept coming and wanting to learn how to spin with me. So it ended up that hundreds and hundreds of people came through my little studio, and I had to get volunteers to help me, and we taught them how to card wool and how to spin, and we ended up making almost 60 hats or more that got at the end exchanged. And this is a project called Knitting Sprawl, where I actually got a grant from the Canada Council on the Arts to travel across Canada, talk with knitters about their communities, particularly communities that are changing from more rural to more suburban sprawl. And the way I wanted to, I'm really interested in suburban sprawl. And so I thought, how can I talk to people? I know how to knit. I can go to knit nights, which happen all over the world and communities everywhere. So it was like this way of engaging people, sort of an automatic group. So this is in St. John's, Newfoundland. And we're knitting in a library that hosts this weekly knit together. And I ended up traveling across Canada. And each region of the country, it's a long, complicated project. Still in the works. So, okay, next. So the idea for me, when Michelle approached me about Simmons, I was very interested in that it's an all-women's college. It's actually one of the very few that are left. And I was told that most of the students there are straight out of high school, so they tend to be in their late teens, early 20s. And I just got thinking about how the word yes, like what that means to young women. It has a lot of connotations. And also, I was thinking about, you're at that age, you're choosing your career, you're making big life decisions, and how could I engage with them in something that would provoke further thought, maybe even more in-depth thought about that time of their life. Next slide. So I got to meet with Michelle and her students, and one of the things actually that happened was, and so often has happened in all my projects, is I come in with this idea, and almost immediately, all the things that I think are super important about it completely change. And a little bit unlike some of the other projects, I actually rarely find myself feeling very strongly about some visual, that it must look this way. And in fact, I really love the fact that almost everything I come up with completely changes by the end of the project. And I think for me, the whole process is the artwork. So I don't have a finished idea of it, which is maybe convenient since it does change. But and I really have become more and more, like with Knitting Sprawl, and with this one, I really got into the idea that the conversation itself becomes the artwork. And that conversation is this agent of change, and that's how we actually change. And I really wanted to create something where what people take away is their memory of conversation. So to that end, I thought I'll create this temporary living room in the middle of the gallery where we can sit around and have conversations. And particularly on this topic. So then I started thinking about this notion. I had read this story where someone described committing to something as if they were a young child jumping into the arms of their parent. And I just really thought about what that image was, and I thought, yes, it's like an unconditional yes. You're just leaping, you have complete trust. So that became the question I posed to the Simmons community. What have you ever done with an unconditional yes? And that's what I thought we could talk about in the living room together. So I also spent 4 days, actually 5, I think, in the living room myself, sitting there with knitting, and I put out some knitting and crocheting supplies just to maybe invite people to come in. And people would come and hang out with me in between classes, and some faculty would come, and we would hang out and talk. So there's someone using the space. And then I heard also later that faculty had a meeting in the space, and people would just come and be there, and they were all really sad when it went away. So this was the opening, so people came, and some people actually had heard about it in advance and brought their own projects, and it's actually a kind of funny story with that little one if you want to go back. It turned out that the woman in the sort of purple was the student of this other woman in the plaid. Her husband was a teacher in high school, a high school teacher, so they turned out they kind of knew each other. I created these crocheted bits of text. It's called Filet Crochet, and it's kind of like pixels on a very big scale. And so I thought, also because there was the risk, and a lot of my projects had this risk, that actually no one will ever participate. And although we had our core group of students who were very enthusiastic and very helpful, it was possible that nobody would participate. And so rather than have empty gallery, because the idea is people would participate with their response. It could be a written response, it could be a visual response, anything. And whatever the response would be, we would hang it up in the gallery. So over the course of the exhibition, the gallery would get fuller and fuller with more and more material in response to that question. So to help fill the gallery and to help provoke responses, I created these pieces that all had sort of provocative statements that I hoped would engage them. So do not squander your life being one of them. And yes, she said yes. This is one of the student responses. So this young woman was very into fashion and design, and so she created this out of Post-it notes and newspaper and safety pins. This was 2 other responses. One from a woman whose mother knit and knit for all her children, and this is actually Michelle's response, her wedding shoes, so her response to what has she done with unconditional yes. You know, some of them were funny, like nail polish, basketball. It was completely wide open. They could contribute whatever they wanted just for the duration of the exhibition. This was a woman who had found that dress in a dumpster, and she made little pockets, and any kind of life event she would that was important to her, she would make a little memento and put it in a pocket on the dress. So as time went on throughout the exhibition, the walls did fill up, actually, and it was quite gratifying to see people were responding, and the more people responded, of course, the more people wanted to respond, and there was more to respond to, and so it grew exponentially from there. And one of the things that we did in discussion with the students, we decided that we would also have donation forms, because part of the response is that every item that was donated had a story behind it, and we wanted to record those stories. So we asked people to write a little bit like what it was and why they chose that particular thing. And we kept them all in a notebook in the gallery. And that notebook actually became really critical, sort of in a surprising way that we didn't anticipate, because it was like the key to why all this stuff was hanging on the walls. And so you could take it around literally and just kind of match. And it was really an important part of the exhibition in the end. And then another kind of surprise was that one of the students had seen a piece that I made at another project and got inspired, and she, of her own sort of volition, she decided to recruit anyone from Simmons who wanted to knit a strip, and she sewed them all together. And it basically, because as Michelle mentioned, the gallery's on the 4th floor, and it's really easy to not go there and not know there's anything going on up there. So she made a knitted trail, basically. So all these people, she got them to knit, and they created this trail that started at the bottom of this beautiful staircase, and it wound its way up and led you to the gallery. So it was like a little Hansel and Gretel kind of thing. And also, as Michelle mentioned, we wanted to also step out of the gallery. So it was a way of trying to think, how can we go beyond just the walls of the gallery? And if you may know, Simmons is well known for its library and archival programs. So I wanted to tap into that as well. So I spent a lot of time in the archives, partly to get to know Simmons, but also to learn to sort of tap into what the archives contained. And what I found were these great, they have these amazing alumni, not like flashy celebrity ones, but like amazing women. And it was really interesting to see like these really strong women who coming up through, you know, it started at the very beginning of the 20th century. And so I picked out, with some assistance from the archivists, some of the alumni, and created these images that it's a little hard to see in this picture, but essentially in the cafeteria and the cafe, they have these napkin holders. So each of the images got placed in the napkin holders. And it was like maybe, I don't know, maybe half a dozen or a dozen different alumni. So it had their information, and then it told you to like go to the gallery and see the show. So it was another way of like getting outside of the gallery, drawing attention, not just to the show, but also to Simmons itself. Next. It's kind of a blurry one, but also one of the fun things I thought about the archives is Simmons has all this really funky stuff about itself. And so I got really into all the memorabilia, and so I decided to make my own memorabilia for the exhibition. So I made a porcelain mug for the Unconditional Yes memorial mug, and I made a plate and something else, I can't remember. But anyway, I made a little set of, so new archival material was actually created for this exhibition. Yeah, I think that's the end.